this week's roundup, we unpack a scary new HTTP/2 weakness that can reboot servers on demand, dig into a wave of Android malware that's hijacking PALs and relaying NFC card data, and look at Microsoft's gigantic patch drop, including a Kerberos 0-day. We'll talk about Cisco's 1010 radius bug and a spike in brute force attacks against Fortinet's SSL VPNs. On the hardware side, Lenovo webcams can be reflashed into BadUSB devices, and Cross2 C2 is helping attackers run Cobalt strike beacons on Linux and macOS. We also cover a WinRAR 0-day being exploited in the wild, a set of Windows DOS flaws that can conscript domain controllers into a DDoS botnet, and finally the ERMAC 3.0 banking Trojan leak that exposes its entire malware as a service stack. Grab your coffee, this is a wild one. Hey folks, today is Monday, August 18th, 2025. I'm Arun from the Sec Master, your friendly neighborhood host. You're listening to our weekly Security Updates podcast, Week 33 edition. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive right into the stories. First up, we've got a brand new twist in the HTTP/2 world. Researchers discovered a technique they call MadeYouReset that abuses the way servers handle RST stream frames. By flooding a connection with malformed control frames, zero-length window update increments, bogus priority frames, and the like, attackers can reset streams repeatedly and blast through the normal limit of 100 concurrent requests. On top of that, there's a variant of HTTP/1.1 desynchronization called CL.0 that can lead to request smuggling. The end result? Your web server falls over while the attacker's connection stays open. Targets include any infrastructure that serves HTTP2, think Apache Tomcat, F5 Big IP, Netty, and other reverse proxies. Impact ranges from denial of service to traffic redirection if combined with smuggling attacks. Countermeasures include installing vendor patches, enabling end-to-end HTTP2 rather than mixing protocols to avoid desync, and configuring rate limiting and connection reset thresholds. If you can't patch immediately, a quick mitigation is to temporarily disable HTTP2 until your vendor issues fixes. Don't forget to log anomalies and test your WAF rules. This attack is all about abusing subtle protocol behaviors. Let's hop over to the mobile world. A cluster of Android malware families is making waves this week. First is PhantomCard, a Trojan that spreads via fake Google Play pages and abuses NFC relay to perform contactless payment fraud. The malware tricks victims into placing their bank card on the infected phone and entering the PIN. An attacker-controlled device then relays those signals to a legitimate point-of-sale terminal. It's sold on Telegram under the name NFU Pay, alongside similar tools like SuperCard X and King NFC. In Brazil, the crooks are using it to drain payment cards, a stark reminder that NFC should only be enabled when needed. There's also Spy Banker, a nasty piece of malware disguised as a customer support app. Once installed, it forwards victims' phone calls to attacker-controlled numbers, grabs SMS messages, and harvests credit card info. Another campaign involves fake credit card apps for several Indian banks that act as droppers for miners and stealers. Many of these Trojans communicate using Firebase cloud messaging and leverage frameworks like kernel SU and APatch to gain root access. A flaw in kernel SU 0.5.7 could allow any malicious app to authenticate as the kernel SU manager. Potential victims include anyone with an Android phone, especially those downloading apps from untrusted sources. The impact ranges from drained bank accounts to phone hijacking. Mitigations are straightforward. Never sideload banking apps, enable two-factor authentication on all financial accounts, keep NFC disabled unless you're actively paying, and install mobile security software. Users with rooted devices should update kernel SU and avoid granting root privileges to unknown apps. Enterprises should educate employees about phishing via WhatsApp or Telegram and enforce mobile device management policies. Microsoft's August Patch Tuesday was a whopper. 111 vulnerabilities fixed, including 16 rated critical, and a publicly disclosed Kerberos 0-day, CVE 2025-53779, dubbed Bad Successor. The flaw is a relative path traversal issue that allows attackers to abuse Delegated Managed Service Accounts, or DMSAs, and pivot from a compromised service to domain admin. Even though only a small fraction of AD controllers are vulnerable, chaining this bug with Kerber roasting or other privilege escalation techniques could yield full domain takeover. Other notable fixes include CVE 2025-53767 affecting Azure OpenAI CVSS 10, CVE 2025-565 in GDI Plus CVSS 9.8, and CVE 2025-50176 in the DirectX kernel. The release also patched dozens of elevation of privilege, remote execution, spoofing, and information disclosure bugs across Windows, Office, Exchange, and more. Outside of Microsoft, 7-Zip, Adobe, AMD, Apple, and others also shipped updates. If you manage Windows systems, patch now. Implement least privilege for service accounts to reduce DMSA abuse, monitor Kerberos ticket requests for anomalies, and consider disabling legacy authentication protocols. Given the scope of this drop, test updates on non-production systems to avoid breaking business-critical services, but don't delay. Attackers already have POCs for several bugs.
Cisco dropped a bombshell with CVE 2025-2026-5, a maximum severity bug in Secure Firewall Management Center (FMC) when configured for radius authentication. Because the subsystem doesn't properly sanitize user input, an unauthenticated attacker can inject arbitrary shell commands via the Web-Based Management Interface or SSH. There's no workaround other than patching. Cisco also patched several DOS vulnerabilities in ASA and threat defense that affect IPsec, IKEv2, SSL VPN, NAT, TLS, and web services. Targets include anyone running Cisco FMC 7.0.7 or 7.0 for device management. Successful exploitation could yield full remote code execution on a firewall manager, giving adversaries the keys to your network. Mitigations are straightforward. Update to the fixed versions, restrict management interfaces to trusted IPs, and disable radius authentication if you don't need it. Use multi-factor authentication and monitor logs for unusual commands. Given the criticality, apply Cisco's patches as soon as possible. Don't put this one off.
Telemetry from Grey Noise shows a significant spike in brute force traffic targeting Fortinet SSL VPNs starting August 3rd. More than 780 unique IPs participated in the waves, with malicious hosts from the US, Canada, Russia, and the Netherlands. Attackers attempted long-running pass-for-guessing campaigns, then shifted to a sudden, high-intensity burst before focusing on FortiManager servers. Historically, such spikes have preceded the disclosure of new Fortinet vulnerabilities, suggesting that adversaries may be testing credentials ahead of a zero-day release. Potential victims are organizations that expose Fortinet VPN or FortiManager portals to the internet. A successful brute force can yield VPN credentials, enabling lateral movement, data theft, or ransomware deployment. Mitigations include enabling multi-factor authentication, enforcing strong password policies, monitoring authentication logs for repeated failed attempts, geo-blocking suspicious IP ranges, and applying Fortinet patches as soon as they're released. If your organization uses FortiManager, restrict access via IP whitelisting and consider disabling remote management until the brute force activity subsides. Next up, a chilling hardware twist. Researchers at Eclipsium found that Lenovo 510 FHD and Lenovo Performance FHD webcams can be reflashed over the USB interface because they don't verify firmware signatures. An attacker who has remote code execution on a host PC could upload malicious firmware to the camera, causing it to re-enumerate as a human interface device keyboard and send keystrokes or commands to compromise the system. The rogue device persists even if the OS is reinstalled, making it a covert backdoor. Lenovo issued firmware version 4.8.0 after disclosure. SigmaStar released a tool to fix the underlying vulnerability. Targets include anyone with the affected webcams. They're popular with home offices and enterprise setups. A compromised camera could inject commands, install backdoors, redirect network traffic, or exfiltrate data. Mitigations include updating webcam firmware immediately, disabling firmware upgrade functionality where possible, and treating USB peripherals as untrusted. For sensitive systems, consider using hardware-authenticated USB devices and physically disconnecting webcams when not in use. This discovery highlights the broader problem of trusting devices that run their own OS. Always vet your hardware and monitor USB enumeration events. Japan's JPCERT-CC reported that attackers are using Cross-C2, an open-source framework that extends Cobalt strike beacons to Linux and macOS. Between September and December 2024, threat actors chained Cross-C2 with PsExec, Plink, and Cobalt Strike to compromise Active Directory environments. They employed custom loaders written in NIM, nicknamed readNIM loader, which decrypt and execute Cobalt Strike shellcode in memory, avoid disk artifacts, and include anti-analysis features. The campaign overlapped with the BlackSuit/Black Basta ransomware group, and attackers also used ELF versions of System BC as a backdoor. The victims? Mostly enterprises with mixed Windows, Linux, and macOS environments, particularly those without endpoint detection on their Unix servers. Cross-C2 underscores how adversaries are blurring platform lines. Your Linux servers are no longer safe just because they're Linux. Mitigation strategies include deploying endpoint detection and response on all operating systems, restricting lateral movement tools like PsExec, monitoring unusual port forwarding activity, for example via Plink, and hunting for signs of in-memory loaders. Defense in depth is key. Segment networks, enforce multi-factor authentication for administrative access, and train staff to recognize phishing that delivers initial loaders. Archive software seldom makes headlines, but a WinRAR vulnerability with a CVSS of 8.8, the CVE 2025-5888, deserves attention. The flaw allows path traversal within an archive so that extraction writes files to arbitrary locations on disk. Russian groups like Paper Werewolf and Romcom exploited it by sending booby-trapped archives in phishing emails. When a victim extracts the archive, a malicious DLL is written to a system directory and executed, opening a backdoor and installing malware like Snipbot, RustyClaw, and MeltingClaw. ESET observes similar abuse of an older WinRAR bug, the CVE 256218, being sold on dark web forums. The attack primarily targets Windows users who rely on outdated WinRAR or UnRAR libraries. Impact includes remote code execution, credential theft, and persistence via alternate data streams. Mitigation is simple. Upgrade to WinRAR 7.13 or later and 7-zip 25.01 if you use that tool. Train staff not to open unsolicited archives, especially those from unknown senders. And consider implementing sandboxing or detonation chambers for inbound email attachments. Organizations should monitor for unusual file extraction paths and disable the ability for archive tools to create symbolic links on Windows. SafeBreach researchers demonstrated a technique dubbed WinDDoS that can co-opt public domain controllers into a DDoS botnet without executing any code on the servers. They found a flaw in the Windows LDAP client that lets an attacker craft referral lists so that domain controllers repeatedly query a victim server, effectively creating a high-bandwidth DDoS. This works because there are no limits on referral list size, and entries aren't freed from memory until retrieval succeeds. By chain-linking thousands of DCs, attackers can generate massive traffic while hiding behind legitimate systems. The technique doesn't stop there. The researchers also devised TorpeDoS, which increases the RPC call rate so dramatically that a single computer can create the impact of a DDoS from tens of thousands of machines. They identified 4 DDoS vulnerabilities: CVE 2025-26673, CVE 2025-32724, CVE 2025-49716, and CVE 2025-49722 that allow unauthenticated or low-privilege attackers to crash domain controllers. These zero-click flaws debunk the idea that denial of service applies only to public services. Internal systems can be weaponized too. The obvious target is any organization with Windows domain controllers, especially those exposed to the public internet. Impact ranges from service disruption to total network outage if your authentication infrastructure is hammered by your own DCs. Mitigations include applying Microsoft patches for the cited CVEs, restricting LDAP and RPC access to trusted networks, implementing rate limiting on authentication services, and monitoring for unusual referral lists or traffic spikes. Don't expose domain controllers directly to the internet. Place them behind firewalls and VPNs, and consider using dedicated DDoS mitigation appliances at the network edge. Finally, an unexpected leak has given defenders a peek into the ERMAC 3.0 banking Trojan. Hunt.io researchers stumbled upon an open directory hosting the entire Malware as a Service kit, a PHP Laravel backend C2 server, a React front-end panel, a Golang exfiltration server, and the Android builder. ERMAC's third version targets more than 700 banking, shopping, and cryptocurrency apps, adds new form injection methods, implements AES CBC encryption, and comes with a new Android backdoor written in Kotlin. The leak also revealed operational sloppiness, a hard-coded JWT secret, a static bearer token, and default root credentials on the admin panel. Exposure of the code means defenders can build detection signatures and sinkhole its infrastructure. But ERMAC is still dangerous for end users. It can overlay fake login screens over legitimate apps to steal credentials. Users should avoid installing apps from unknown sources, use strong, unique passwords, and enable MFA. Banks can implement behavioral analytics and push transaction notifications to detect anomalies. Security teams should hunt for traffic to the leaked infrastructure, patch devices that allow installation from unknown sources, and educate employees to look out for overlay attacks.
That wraps up our Week 33 rundown. We covered everything from web protocol bugs and brute-forced VPNs to cameras that turn evil and leaked Trojan source code. Cybersecurity is a fast-moving field, and staying informed is our best defense. As always, keep visiting the Sec Master for more updates and stay safe out there. Thanks for tuning in to this week's podcast, for being with us, and for supporting us. We'll catch you next time.